Good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to the broadcast. It is November. Holy cow. This is the last full month of school that we have going on. I am so excited when we get to November because Thanksgiving's just around the corner, and when we make it to Thanksgiving, we are done, ski baby. We are done. Got my coffee here this morning. Looks like I've got Amber Casey in the audience. I'll bet Yanan's out there. April's here as well. Good to see you. How's everybody doing today? Week, what are we? Week 10 now. Holy cow, we are getting there. I hope classes are going well for everybody. It's a little bit chilly here in Willow Springs, North Carolina this morning. Jacket weather. I've got my gray beard going on. Check it out. You see all that white stuff there? Holy cow, I am getting old. Hi, Ashley. Good to see you as well. Hope everybody's doing good. Let's see. Quick note. We are only having one lecture this week. So today is our only lecture. We only have one lecture for Chapter 10. All right, so I will not be lecturing Thursday morning. We, of course, will be having our weekly webinar on Wednesday night and Thursday night, where we'll be talking about gender socialization and what that means for children. Okay, so how many of you did a gender reveal for your baby? Did anybody do a gender reveal? A little blue puff of smoke or a pink puff of smoke? Did you hit a baseball, kick a field goal, hit a piñata, anything like that? That's what we're going to be talking about today in class, gender and sexuality. And that's what we'll be talking about in the Wednesday night webinar. Okay, let's see. Ashley, AK, and Amber. Well, I've got my solid audience here today. I'm always glad to have you ladies here. Interesting. I thought we might get a few guys in the audience today, but that's okay. Right, Amber, yeah, right. Gender reveals are pretty new, aren't they? They're not the oldest thing in the world, huh? I had my kids before we did gender reveals either. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's lecture. We're going to talk a little bit about biological sex, gender identity, and gender preference. Oh, April said she had her baby before gender reveals were a thing. How old are gender reveals now? They're not that old, right? Just a couple years. Of course, everybody's putting them on social media too, right? Okay, we are at 9:04. Probably time to get started talking. All right, so let's talk a little bit about biological sex. Wow, hold on. Stop the presses. Amber didn't even find out before the baby was born. Your daughter, did you do that on purpose? What in the world? You wanted to be surprised? I didn't find out. Wow. Would you like being surprised and not being able to buy your stuff? Right? Because you know you have to buy blue for boys and pink for girls. Is that a thing? Or did you just buy all yellow? You didn't want to know. Okay, Amber didn't want to know. Ashley, I guess you wanted to be surprised as well. That's cool. I like that. I like that. We had two boys, and I just couldn't stand the anxiety, so I had to know just as soon as possible, right? It seems like it takes forever to have a baby, right? You get pregnant and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. And you're like, good God, is that child ever going to get here? Yeah, exactly. April's like me. We're both planners, so we had to know. But you know, really, you probably shouldn't have to know unless you're going to engage in gender socialization, which is the topic that we have for this week's webinar. So we will talk about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about biological sex. It's the physical characteristic of sex. These are affected by genes and hormone production. Hold on. I got another comment coming through. With the first three we found out, but we had a boy and a girl after that. So it didn't matter what the last three were. Oh my goodness, Ashley, 5 babies. My goodness. You had a basketball team, didn't you? Amazing. Okay, if you look over there on the right side of this screen, oh my God, Amber had 6. Ashley had 6. Is there 7 in the mix? What about 7, Ashley? Are we going to have 7? Oh my goodness. 7 babies. 7 babies. I would love more. Goodness me. Wow, you're amazing, Ashley. You must have the patience of a saint because 2 babies drove me nuts. But you must be the Buddha. Amazing, amazing. That is pretty cool. What about you, AK and Amber? Would you like to have more babies? What do you think? Okay, if you look over while we're waiting for the responses, if you look over on the other side, we have some karyotypes over here. This is basically just a picture of your chromosome. If you remember, we all have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs of chromosomes. You get 23 from your mom and 23 from your dad, right? The sperm fertilizes the egg cell. They each have 23 chromosomes. They're zygotes or sex cells, which means they have 23 chromosomes. They meet and give you 46 chromosomes. If you look starting from left to right, top to bottom, you can number these chromosomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down. And what you're going to see is they're all X-shaped until you get to the 23rd pair. And if you look at the top karyotype, you'll notice that we have 2 X chromosomes in the 23rd pair. This is a female, biological female. If you look at the bottom karyotype, you'll notice that we have a big X chromosome and a teeny tiny Y chromosome at the bottom. This is a biological male right here. Okay, now, here's the thing. Some people say that your chromosomes are it. Your chromosomes are your sexuality. We have 2 sexes. We have boys and we have females. That's a simplification, okay? If you look down there in the 23rd pair of chromosomes, you see 2 X's. That's not a vagina there. That's not a vagina. If you look down at the bottom chromosome, you see that we have a Y chromosome. A Y chromosome is not a penis. So no, your genes are not a final determinant of what you are as a male or female. Instead, your genes provide the potential. Now, in order for you to turn out to what we would be called a biological male or biological female also requires a certain hormone timing, the release of hormones at particular times in order to create a biological male or biological female. So sometimes these hormones don't go at the right time, or we don't get the right amount of hormones, and biological sex can actually fall somewhere in between male and female. So all zygotes begin with fertilized sex cells begin with undifferentiated gonads and both male and female reproductive ducts. In fact, all little babies start off really somewhere in between. We have sex glands and we have sex ducts, but we're not a male or a female. Instead, what happens is hormones begin bathing the baby at 6 weeks of gestation and turn that baby into a biological male. All right, now we have this little part on the Y chromosome called the SRY, the sex determining region of the Y chromosome. All right, and it stimulates the growth it turns these gonads into testes at 6 or 7 weeks of development. If the baby has an X chromosome, it doesn't have the SRY gene, and so these gonads will turn into ovaries. All right, now the SRY gene has to click on at the right time, and it causes these gonads to turn into testes, which then should start producing androgens, which will begin to turn the baby into a boy. Now, these sex glands are a part of the endocrine system, and they release these hormones into the blood system that affect the development of the physical characteristics of sex. If the SRY gene turns these gonads into testes, they will start releasing androgens. The one you probably have heard of is testosterone. And if you do not have this SRY gene, then the gonads will turn into ovaries and will begin releasing estrogens. And one of those is called estradiol. Now, hormone production difference in utero helps create the primary sex characteristics. That is the testes or the ovaries and the penis or the vagina. Hormone production is going to differ between males and females throughout their life, but it's really going to kick in during puberty, and that's when male male testosterone production is really going to shoot up in incredibly high levels, and it's going to create help. It's going to help mature the primary sex characteristics and create the development of these secondary male sex characteristics. And the estrogens, of course, are going to create they're going to help mature the primary sex characteristics of the female and create the secondary sex characteristics. Now, exactly what are primary sex characteristics and secondary sex characteristics? Primary sex characteristics, we call them primary because these are the sexual organs related to reproduction. Okay, and so these are your genitals as well as the ovaries or testes that create these sex cells. So those are your primary sex characteristics. Now, testosterone and estrogen differences are also going to begin to create the secondary sex characteristics, which will begin to occur around puberty. It's the development of sexual maturity. Now, it turns out that the females are going to begin puberty a little bit earlier than our males. So if you think back to when you were in fifth grade, and these hormones are going to cause the human to go through a growth spurt as well. And since females tend to start puberty earlier than males, what you're going to see is that the little girls in fifth grade are going to be, as a general rule, taller and heavier than the little boys in fifth and sixth grade until the little boys hit puberty and start having their growth spurts. And then they're going to grow to be taller and heavier than the females. Females begin around the age of 8, and in males it begins around the age of 9 or 10. And there's great variation in when puberty starts. It can start and in fact, from what I understand, there's a wider range of puberty when puberty beginning for females than there are for males. And what you're going to see is these secondary sex characteristics that begin to develop. And there are social outcomes associated with starting puberty late or early. For females, starting puberty earlier, being the first one to go through puberty, tends to have negative effects for a female. On the other hand, beginning puberty earlier as a male tends to have positive effects on the self-esteem. You know, I remember when we were all 13, just sort of getting into the mix of puberty, we had this kid I played baseball with. His name was Jack. And by 13, Jack had that V-shaped body with the broad shoulders. He had a full chest of hair. He had a 5 o'clock shadow. And I remember all of us boys on the baseball team were just amazed and adored Jack because he was such a man. And we were all just little boys with high voices. So what are these secondary sex characteristics? They're sex characteristics not related to reproduction. However, they are characteristics that help us, that allow us to differentiate between males and females when we walk around and we see them, right? And so what are the secondary sex characteristics? For us guys, we're going to get this beard. Actually, the facial hair is going to be one of the last things. I'm starting from top to bottom. And so I'm going to talk about the facial hair, even though that's the last thing to develop for us fellows. We're going to start to get that chiseled jaw. We're going to get a deep voice. If you listen to little boys, I'm out there on the baseball field with kids every weekend, and these little fifth grade boys have these real high-pitched voices. And then when I umpire the 14-year-old boys, their voices are much deeper. You're going to get the body hair under the armpits and the chest. The boys are going to start bulking up and getting a little more muscle, and they're going to have the pubic hair as well. Now, the females are going to have some of the same characteristics. They're going to have the pubic hair. They're going to have the armpit hair. But their shape is going to change a little bit different. They're going to get a little more fat on the hips, which is going to sort of define the waist a little bit more and give them sort of that sort of rounded shape. And the females are also going to get fatty growth that's going to lead to the growth of breasts. Okay, now estradiol production in females increases by 8 times in females during puberty, and testosterone production in males increases by 10 times during puberty. So all of these secondary sex characteristics are going to be a result of this increased sex hormone production. Both sexes experience a growth spurt during puberty. As I said, girls a bit earlier than boys. Okay. Now, here's the deal. Like I said, it's not as simple as X or Y. The X chromosome is not a vagina, and the Y chromosome is not a penis. Instead, they are potential that kick off the development of the primary sexual differentiation. However, here's the thing. Just like any other developmental trajectory, it has to go off in a perfect timing with the perfect levels of hormones in order for you to develop into the prototypical male or the prototypical female. However, there are people, for some reason, hormones aren't produced at the right levels, hormones don't come out at the right times, and what this does is this messes up the development of this prototypical sexuality. It happens. And we can discuss whether or not people of intersex should play male sports or female sports. That, my friends, is a fair argument to have. However, it is not a fair argument to say that these people don't exist. It is not fair. It is not true at all. There are some people who have both male and female sex characteristics, and this results as a function of variations in the genes. We do have genetic mutations that happen, and these genetic mutations may lead to hormone differences and hormone malfunctions. So it does happen. Now, here's the thing. There are genetic variations. Sometimes you get people some females who don't have 2 X chromosomes. This is called Turner syndrome. This is a genetic female that's missing a second sex chromosome in the 23rd pair. These females don't have typical development in their ovaries, leading to really low levels of estrogen in females. You know what? Sometimes males will have an extra X chromosome in their 23rd pair, XXY. And this leads to a genetic male that has some secondary sex characteristics, like the development of breasts, little or no sperm production, reduced muscle mass, and less facial or body hair. You know what? And sometimes these secondary sex characteristic differences are so slight that a male won't even know this for their entire life, or they might find out as an older man. They may actually find out that they have Klinefelter syndrome. Now, it turns out there are also some males who have 2 Y chromosomes, an XYY syndrome. And these guys, they develop into typical males, but they'll get super duper tall. Now, they are not more violent, they're not more aggressive, but they do get taller. So it is just like you can have a 3rd chromosome in your 21st pair, which leads to trisomy 21, which is called Down syndrome. Just like you can have an extra chromosome in your 21st pair, you can have an extra chromosome in your 23rd pair. or not enough chromosomes in your 23rd pair. Don't think that your genetic instructions come perfect all the time. They do not. Now, sometimes you may have genetic differences. You may have all your chromosomes, but the genes on those chromosomes, remember genes occur on chromosomes. Basically, a chromosome is just a big collection of 30,000 or so genes. And sometimes these genes don't work properly. They have a mutation or something or other which causes them not to function properly. And this leads to hormone differences, which may also create people who don't fall at the ends of this sexual spectrum. So they have congenital hyperplasia. Sometimes you'll see a genetic female XX who's exposed to greater androgens in utero. For some reason, her testosterone levels will be too high during the pregnancy. And this leads to genitals which are not clearly male or female. On the other hand, there are some males whose body is insensitive to testosterone, and their body doesn't respond to testosterone released by the testes. And this leads to genetic males whose primary sex characteristics don't develop. All right? And so what I want you to understand is that intersex is a biological reality that does happen. So talk all you want about whether or not they should use this bathroom or that bathroom. Talk all you want about whether or not they should play men's sports or female sports. But please understand that not everybody comes out perfectly biologically male or perfectly biologically female. Good morning, Ronique. I see you're in here. It's good to see you. We were just talking about the fact that that intersex is a reality that does happen. Yes, most of us develop to be a perfectly formed male or a perfectly formed female, but there are people, because of genetic variations or chromosomal variations or variations in hormone functioning, that fall somewhere in between these two biological poles. Okay? Now, we talked a little bit at the beginning, Ronique, before you got here. I was having a little fun with the ladies. We were talking about gender reveals. There were three females in here, three moms, and we were talking about whether or not they did gender reveals. And what we realized is that all of us had our children before gender reveals were a thing. So no pink smoke or blue smoke for our babies. Now, if you look on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, everybody's doing a gender reveal. And you know, I used to coach the Wake Tech baseball team, and all my former baseball players, it seems like they're all having baseball gender reveals where somebody tosses a ball at them and they swing and hit it and it explodes into a color of blue or pink. You know what? As soon as we start doing that, we start creating expectations for our children, because we as a society believe that boys must be one thing and females must be another. Now, there is some utility to this, and we're going to talk about that on Wednesday or Thursday night if you come to the webinar, okay? I like the things that make me a male, and I'm sure you females like the things that make you females. But what I don't think people realize is that a lot of our final beliefs, our final preferences, the things we do, the things we find interesting, are not so much a product of our biological sex as they are a product of gender role socialization. Gender role socialization. Now, if you'll remember from chapter 7, we talked about a schema. Remember, we talked about schemas as being a set of associations with a given concept. So let's go to the whiteboard real quick, and somebody tell me, if I write boy here, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Let's start telling. What is the schema for a boy here? Can somebody tell me what things go with boy? What sort of things do we think about? I think about muddy. Can somebody else give me some terms? Sports. There we go. Sports. Sir, don't create social problems. Sports, anything else? Let's see what else we got. Sports. Anybody else got some things that go with boys? How about the color blue? Dinosaurs. Dude, dinosaurs. Why can't females like dinosaurs? I don't get that, right? What about else? Trucks. There we go. Trucks. Blue. Green for boys. That's interesting. I didn't know green for boys. Okay, let's see. What about this? Aggressiveness? Do we say that? Right? And so, in a sense, if you think about it, we have all of these associations that we create for boys. And you know what? We could do the same thing for females. If we could, somebody please tell me, what are some associations you have when you think of girl, or female? Do we have any associations for females? Girl, that looks like grit, excuse me. Grit, girl. What do we have for girl? Pink, princess. Oh my goodness, a princess. Holy cow. White for babies. Oh, girls love baby dolls, don't they? You know what? Hate to tell you this, but I actually liked I actually liked dolls too. They were fun to play around with. Tea parties. Holy cow, tea parties. In fact, I remember when I was 6, I had this friend. I lived up in Maryland, Frederick, Maryland, and my best friend was this 6-year-old girl, Terry, and I used to play over at her house. And we would play. She had the coolest Barbie doll set up, man. You know, she had the car, she had the Malibu Barbie, she had the house. I, of course, would play with the Ken doll. She'd play with the Barbie doll. And man, we had so much fun playing pretend with her Barbie doll set. So when they say that boys can't play with Barbie dolls, you know what? I'm not sure. I had some fun with those female toys, right? When you were a kid, you sort of played with who you had around you. And if it was a female, I played some female games. And it didn't seem to change me, right? But we do have these beliefs. Now, let's think about this schemas. So we have schemas for everything. We have schemas for trucks. We have schemas for circus. We have schemas for the police. We have schemas for criminals. We have schemas about everything. We have gender schemas. And a gender schema is simply a knowledge structure that contains the information about the aspects of gender, including social expectations, traits, interests, thoughts, and feelings, right? So boys don't cry. Girls can cry. Boys are supposed to be astronauts. Girls are supposed to be teachers. You know, my wife runs a hotel. She is a manager of a hotel, and she's a hard-charging hotel manager. But when she was an 18-year-old, her parents didn't want her to go to college because girls don't go to college. And they told her if she did go to college, she needed to be a nurse or a teacher. That was all she was expected to be. My wife says that at least once a week, somebody will walk into the hotel, see her at the front desk and say, "Excuse me, I need to speak to the manager. Where is he? Where is he?" They will do that all the time. And so a gender schema is just a set of expectations. And I don't think we realize how powerful these schemas are. I find myself talking about medical doctors sometimes, and I'll say, yes, when I go to the doctor, he'll do this. And I catch myself saying he when I refer to doctors. And when I refer to teachers, I will use the female pronoun. You just don't realize how powerful these gender schemas are. You know what? By the age, and it happens so quickly, do you know that by the age of 6 months, infants learn to associate high-pitched voices with females and low-pitched voices with males? Those are gender expectations that are created before the first year of birth. And these gender schemas serve as interpretive shortcuts for processing information about people based on gender, right? So if I see a little female baby, I automatically pick up the girl toys and try to play with the girl toys with the little female. If I see a little boy, in a room, I may buy him a truck because it's a shortcut. That's an easy way for me to think of what toy does this boy want. So these gender schemas are useful. Schemas are useful, but they also constrain people, their beliefs, their behaviors, their attitudes, and their whole lives. Now, the term gender role socialization is the process by which we stick gender schemas into our children's head. It's a process of enculturating a person to have beliefs and expectations about their roles, preferences, behaviors, and beliefs that are consistent with their sex. You know, I used to teach in a a program. It was called the HEP program, and it helped Hispanic migrant workers get their high school diplomas. And a lot of my students were females. And we moved this program online because these females couldn't come to night school because they were expected to cook dinner and take care of the children. And so it was very hard for them to make these night classes. So we had to work with the gender roles that these females experienced or were living under in order to help them get their high school diploma. I see Amber's got a comment here. Let me read that. My daughter recently met the first female pitching coach in MLB, the Yankees, and when she was applying in 2013, she had to change her name from Rachel to Ray before anyone responded. Wow. Wow. You know, I'm going to be honest, when I think about a female pitching coach, it's hard for me to even wrap my head around that, Amber, because baseball is for males, and that's really been and I grew up with that belief in my head for most of my life. I do remember seeing that pitching coach, and I remember when I saw it, it was absolutely shocking to me, because if you want to talk about an old school group of sexist guys, walk into a professional baseball clubhouse. We are about as old school and as traditional in baseball as it comes. And you're right. Was it a hitting coach? Yeah. And so I could definitely see that happening. I remember seeing we typically think of referees, umpires, as being males for sports too. And I think now there's a female basketball basketball referee in the NBA, and there's also I've seen female referees in football, and it is definitely a new thing because females aren't supposed to do that. Isn't it amazing that we have these expectations about what you can and can't do? You know, I do have some male nursing students in my developmental psych classes, and I do know some male nurses, but not very many, because nurses are supposed to be female, right? And we have expectations about males. Males are doctors, nurses are females, right? And it is an exciting time for females in professional men's sports. I would agree with that. And you know what? I don't see why we should not have that. Although I have to admit, as an old 50-year-old man, it's something that I'm having to wrap my head around. And so how do we learn these gender roles? Well, we learn it from observational learning. And if you remember chapter 6, we talked about learning in chapter 6, and we talked about operant conditioning, right? If your little boy picks up a truck, you give him a smile. If your little boy picks up a Barbie doll, you give him a frown. If your little daughter puts on a pink dress, you tell her how cute she is. If your little daughter tells you she wants to be a soldier for Halloween, you give her a frown. So we reward gender conforming behavior, and we punish gender bending behavior. And our kids watch what we do and observe and model or copy what we do. And you would be surprised how quickly children, 4 and 5 and 6 year olds, begin to self-segregate into little boy groups and little girl groups, and they develop little boy behaviors and little girl behaviors, and little boys and little girls who don't conform to those behaviors are not seen as being friends, are not found to be friends, and are penalized and ostracized by their little boy groups and little girl groups, right? Now, here's the deal. I will tell you that gender role expectations have changed greatly in the U.S. over the last 40 years. And you can look at this chart right here and see that 3 beliefs: men are better politicians, women take care of the home, and preschoolers suffer if mom works. These are 3 gender conforming behaviors. And if you'll see the chart up the y-axis, we had the percentage of people who disagree with these beliefs. And what you're going to find from 1977, nobody disagreed with the belief that men were better politicians. Nobody disagreed with this thought that women should take care of the home. Nobody disagreed with the idea that preschoolers were better off if mom stayed home. But people have now changed these behaviors. And you know what? I will tell you, my wife and I sort of switched roles with our children, because my wife works long hours as a hotel manager. She works 60 to 70 hours a week. I'm a community college teacher that teaches online. My life is pretty soft and cushy. So guess who took the children to the doctors? Guess who took the children to school and picked them up from school? Guess who took the children on play dates? Who cooked? Who washed clothes? This was me. Dr. Roddenberry did all of these things that I grew up believing were, quote, female behaviors. And I will tell you, when I went to the playground, I was lonely because it was all moms there. When I picked the kids up at school, I was in carpool line with 95% females, right? And so it's weird. These beliefs are changing, but they're still changing even slower. Yeah, it's a crazy life, and I keep arguing to my wife that she needs to give it up. There's no reason to work that hard at a job. In fact, I will say, rather than being a gender bender parent, I actually felt like a single parent a lot of times because she just works so much. Yeah, I actually thought it was kind of cool. And in fact, to me, my kids were so important that I didn't want to leave it in anybody else's hands. I'm kind of obnoxious that way. I'm like, you know what? If you want something done, do it right, do it yourself. And so I was very interested in doing all of those female type behaviors. And I hate to say female type, you know what I mean? Our culture suggests that those are female. I'm not saying that they are female, but our culture does suggest that. Now, gender role expectations in non-traditional cultures, US, Germany, Netherlands, and England, are not nearly as rigid as in traditional cultures. So as I suggested to you, when I was helping out with the HEP program, all of these Hispanic females, when they came to the orientation on Saturday, they all had their children with them because they weren't allowed to leave them at home and take off without their children. In their culture, the woman takes care of the children. And so they brought their children, in fact, they brought their whole family to the orientation. And we switched to an online model so they could still be at home to cook dinner in their traditional households. And so you're going to see some traditional cultures. There is great variation in the United States. And you folks out here, I'm not sure where any of you are from. You might come from more traditional societies where we do have these expectations. Now, I will tell you, when I was in Germany probably a month ago, and I found Germany to be a non-traditional country. So I met some female CEOs and some very powerful females while I was in Germany. There were female cops. There were other females in places that you wouldn't necessarily see them even here in the United States. And you know what? I remember walking by a police officer, a big burly male police officer. He looked about 6'2". He looked like a linebacker, frankly. And I turned around and the guy had 2 really big earrings in his ear while he was on duty in his uniform. And you know what? We typically think of females earrings as being sort of female accoutrements. Now, they're a little less female than they used to be, but to see a police officer wearing two earrings was just kind of surprising to me. Now, I got my ear pierced in 1985, and holy cow, did my dad give me the business about getting my earring in 1985. I went away to summer camp at Duke. I went to a pride parade and got an earring and did all this stuff. And I came back and told my father about it, and he was not happy at all. So I've had the earring. But in 1985, you had to get your earring if you were going to do it as a boy, you had to get it in one particular ear. You had to get it on the left side, because if you got it on the right side, it meant something completely different. And you certainly didn't get two earrings in 1985. I know, I know. I actually, you know what? I took psychology. I took my first college class at Duke as I was a junior in high school. It was during the summer. And I took Intro to Psychology at Duke University. Made a C in it, by the way. Shh. Yeah, and that's where I decided that I was going to get an earring and be edgy. My dad just gave me an evil look when I got my first earring. I liked it so much that I went back about 6 months later and got a second piercing in my ear. And my father at that point said, "Dude, it ain't gonna happen." And he made me take the second earring out. But I was gonna get all edgy in 1985, and Dad wouldn't let me because I was violating gender standards. Now, here's the deal. Not only do we have a sense of a biological sex, but you also have a belief, a feeling of whether or not you are male or female. So these hormones that course through your bloodstream make you feel one way or the other. And also, not only do you differ in whether or not you feel like you're a male or a female, but you also may differ in who you find sexually attractive. Now, I'm cisgender, I'm a male, I feel male, and I also prefer females. I'm sexually attracted to females. So that makes me your typical cisgender male. But you know what? Not everybody necessarily feels that way. Gender is a belief that develops after your biological sex, and it can either match your biological sex or it might not match your biological sex. Now, how do children develop their beliefs about gender identity? You know what? Children around the age of 2 or 3 understand the label boy and girl, but you know what? They don't understand necessarily that they're constant. So a little boy may see a friend in pink and call him a girl, may see him the next day in blue and call him a boy. So they don't have sort of gender constancy, if you will. By the age of 3 or 4, children are going to develop this gender constancy, but they will not understand that gender doesn't relate to the length of your hair or to what color you're wearing. So as a 3 or 4-year-old may see a long-haired boy and think of that boy as a girl because he has long hair. And the little boy or the child may say, you know what, long-haired kids are girls. They don't understand the critical qualities that make us a male or a female. They have gender constancy, but they don't quite understand what it is that makes you a boy or a girl. And it's not the length of your hair, it's your biological sex characteristics, correct? Now, I will tell you, my parents were hippies, and in the 70s, I was what they called a tow-headed kid. I had white blonde hair, and it was really straight, and my dad let my hair go down to here. And I have to admit, I was an adorable little 5-year-old boy. But I can't tell you how many times people would come up to my father and say, "Oh, that is the most beautiful girl you have. And my dad would have to correct him and say, no, he's a boy. And I remember that happening a bunch of times. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was umpiring a baseball game. And I went up to, there was an African American lady sitting outside the stands after my game. I went outside and she had this cute little baby, and the baby had long hair in cornrows, and it was the most adorable little baby in the whole world. And I said, oh my goodness, what a beautiful little girl. Guess what? It was a little boy that had long hair in cornrows. And I was just so humiliated and embarrassed because I made the same mistake that was made with me back in the early 70s, right? And so it's kind of weird how we associate these external characteristics with being a boy or a girl. Now, by the age of 5 or 6, children are going to have what we would call the mature understanding of what it means to be a boy or a girl. And we will know that it has to do with our genitals and our primary sex characteristics at the age of 5 or 6. Now, sometimes biological and gender identity do not match. Most people's gender identity matches their biological sex. As I suggested to you, I'm a biological male. I feel like a biological male, and I am interested in biological females. So I'm cisgender and heterosexual. Not everybody is like that. If you look at this chart underneath me, what you're going to see is that people vary in their the match between their biological sex and their gender. I'm cisgender, but there are people who are transgender. They may have the biological characteristics of a male and feel female. They may have the biological characteristics of a female but feel male. They may have that. There are some people who do not feel sex one way or the other. They're what we call genderqueer. They may not feel male or female, even though they are clearly biologically male or biologically female. And then some people may identify as both a male and a female. And I'm telling you, it has to do with the hormones. It may have to do with the hormones that are coursing through your body. Now, the crazy thing is, you say, no, these people are just pretending. These people are just pretending. I promise you, people don't try to not fit in with society. That's the most painful, difficult thing in the world. Nobody chooses to be different from the rest of us. I promise you, nobody wakes up at the age of 13 and says, you know what, I'm going to play a joke on society, all right? These represent biological differences. Brain scans show that the brain activity of transgender people matches the brain of their gender and not their sex, right? Now, while being transgender is not a psychological disorder, some transgender people do suffer significant distress because their gender identity doesn't match their biological sex. Being transgender is not a psychological disorder. However, being different, not fitting in, sometimes causes people anxiety, sometimes causes people to feel depression or distress. So it does happen. Did you know that until 1973, homosexuality was considered a psychological disorder in clinical psychology? So this belief that people's gender has to match their biological sex is definitely ingrained, or is definitely sort of a difficult thing to lose in people today. In fact, if you look in the media, you will see that people still today have a problem with people whose gender identity, whose beliefs doesn't match their biological sex. There are still problems for these people in society today. Now, so one disorder that some people have is gender dysphoria. And aside from the depression or the anxiety, people may feel just general distress regarding the inconsistency between their sex and their gender identity. And finally, there are variations in sexual orientation. And here's the deal. We all have sexual preferences, people whom we desire to become intimate with. And not all people are attracted to members of the opposite sex. That's just the way it is. All right, and this is not. This does not mean that they have a psychological disorder. Not all people's sexual preferences is even limited to one sex. They may find people on both sides, both males and females, sexually attractive. And you know what? It turns out that females do tend to show a little more sexual fluidity than males. So it's better to think of sexual preference as existing on a continuum, just like biological sex exists on a continuum. It's not categorical. Now, gender nonconforming behavior as a child is typically associated with nonconforming gender sexual preferences as an adult. I remember I had a cousin, Pat, and as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old boy, it was clear that Pat, who was a male, was gay. I mean, it was clear. He liked girl toys. He liked girl clothes. He liked being with the girls. You could just tell Pat was different. And so he exhibited lots of gender non-conforming behavior as a child. Now, growing up in Georgia and South Carolina, this caused Pat a lot of difficulty. And my cousin Pat actually grew up and got married to a female early in his 20s. They had no children and it didn't last long. And then Pat finally came out as homosexual and now has had an amazing career as a social worker and become a very powerful and confident homosexual man. But it took a long time for him to accept and to be able to show this aspect of himself growing up in South Georgia, right? Now, what are some biological factors associated with sexual orientation? It appears to have a genetic link, so it's which is stronger for males than for females. Like I said, females show more sexual fluidity. Oh, and by the way, being raised by homosexual parents will not make you gay. I have a homosexual friend now that have had difficulty they've been trying to adopt for many years, and they're just running into problems because people believe that a homosexual couple will raise a homosexual child. Does not happen. Now, exposure to hormones, prenatal exposure to androgens does seem to be associated with females who show sexual attraction towards other females. The maternal immune system, there's this weird thing called the older brother effect. If you have older brothers, it turns out that young boys who have older brothers are more likely to be homosexual than firstborn and only born male children. And you know what? You can actually look at the size of the hypothalamus, and it tends to be associated with sexual activity patterns. All right? So that's really all I have to say today about sexuality. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a sex researcher. I'm not even an expert. I hope I didn't say anything that was wrong or incorrect, but I just want you to understand that I had to learn these things as a male. I did not understand gender until my 30s. I did not understand reference and the powerful role it has in gender socialization. So I hope by listening to this lecture today, each and every one of you has developed a more nuanced of human sexuality. That's all we're going to talk about this week. We're not going to cover patterns of sexual behavior. I wanted to talk about sex and gender identity today. I hope you come Wednesday night. We're going to have some really interesting things to talk about in our webinar on Wednesday night. And I have a really cool video that demonstrates the power of visualization. So get to class and come prepared to talk about sex and gender. If nobody has any questions, if you have a question, please type it in the chat bar. I'm going to spend a moment here chatting you up before I log Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to talk about anything? Okay. Well, cool. All right. Since everybody's saying thank you, I'm going to assume that I have run my mouth enough. Holy cow, folks, stop. Alla Hurani. Look at that. Of course I remember you, Alla. Alla is a former student. I think it was last semester, right? And she's decided, it seems like all the time I get students stopping back by to say hello in the live broadcast. And Alla is here today. Thanks for coming. It's good to see you. And I miss having you in class too. And everybody say hello to Alla. And you know what, Amber, April, I hope that you folks come back to visit me sometimes just like Alla has done. I hope everything's going well, Alla. How are your classes going? Hey, stop by my office and see me sometime, okay? I'd love to have you come by. All right, folks, I'm going to log off for now. I hope to see you in Wednesday night's webinar. Have a great day. Take care.